Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. For your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and about whatever it is that they might want to talk about. So tonight's guests are, to my left is Kevin Boyette, who has been on the show before, and by popular demand and the overwhelming response of the viewing audience, we had to have him back. No. But anyhow, I like what he does and what he talks about. And to my right is Roger Bates, who I've been working on for a long time to get to come on this show, and we finally convinced him. And Kevin helped me. And for Rick over there, my conservative camera person, number 3, I will bow a little bit and bend because we are 3 leftists here, and Rick is quite a conservative, and we go around and round about stuff. But anyhow, we're going to have a good time talking about what's important and the Beaverton Peace Vigil and things related to that, or whatever else that may come up that we believe is important and useful to talk about tonight. The opening shot you saw was a collection of pictures of Hillary Clinton, and I chose that to open with because for me it illustrates what the press can do with pictures of people. We do know in third world countries oftentimes that people aren't literate, many of them aren't, and all they can do is show pictures of people to the population so that they can create an impression of whether you, the person looking at the picture, should like or dislike or be afraid of this particular person. And occasionally, even the Oregonian, our local paper here in Portland, Oregon, I get very upset because there's a very unflattering picture about a person who I particularly like, and I think it wasn't fair because they're wanting me to form an opinion about this person based on the picture. So in this collection of pictures of Hillary, you can pick any one of those to illustrate a particular mood that they would want to create. And when you record this or see this show again when it's rebroadcast, look at the various impressions or pictures of Hillary here. There are some that are just delightful and pleasant, a warm human being, and there are others where she looks like a beast and she's going to bite my head off. But keep in mind when you're reading an article or in a magazine and you see a picture of somebody, keep in mind that the editors of that publication may be interested in having you form an opinion based on the image that that picture is conveying. So much for that. That's my soapbox. So as you know, my shows go in about 3 segments. The first segment is what I call the basic bio stuff. So we get to talk about who you are and where you came from and what kind of bad habits you had when you were 6 years old. No, not true. And so that the viewers can get an idea where you're coming from when you have views and opinions about the things we'll be talking about. And you all know who I am out there, and Don Baham, retired clinical psychologist, and spend most of my time doing my talk show. I have a small practice of teaching people about transactional analysis as a means of understanding who and how and what they're about. So that fills a lot of my time in retirement. I retired about 20 years ago, and I was born in 1928 in New Orleans, Louisiana, in Charity Hospital, which is going to go by the wayside now since Katrina. And I look kind of funny, and red, white, and black racially, so that's why I look mixed up like this anyhow. Recovering Catholic, humanist. I'm not sure whether there's a God or hereafter. That's enough about me because I want to save enough time. There's so much to hear from you guys.
Okay, well, my name's Roger Bates. I've been in the Beaverton area for about 25 years. Moved up from California. I was originally born in London, England.
London,
England, in 1943. My father spent 3 years in the war, Africa and Italy, and he came back and decided that he'd had enough of a country that was always at war, and he packed up the family and moved us out in 1948, out to California. I haven't been particularly politically minded until about 2000, and started taking a much more attention to what's going on.
What invited you to become political minded in 2000? You happy with how things were going?
No, well, everything. It seemed like every decision that the current administration was making was just opposite direction to where I thought it ought to go. I never felt that the war was justified in the first place, which really got me going on that.
All right, let's put that aside for now.
Okay.
And get a little more personal stuff about you, you know? So, you think about going back to England and living?
No. I have thought in terms of, gee, would I get up and do what my father did? Because the thought definitely has gone through my mind. But New Zealand is the place that I would want to go and visit and check out. But there's no way, because my wife would not be interested, and I think it's too late for me to move off now anyway.
I've thought about New Zealand too, and I want to go there in the worst way, but with the dollar sinking and what's going on with it anyhow. And Australia, and I guess Australia is recovering from ultra-conservative leanings and becoming more centrist or liberal now with the new Prime Minister. But anyhow, enough of that. Anything significant about your education, or just a normal education?
Oh, I guess I would say fairly normal. I was lucky enough to get myself interested in electronics basically right from 8th grade up through high school. The only thing that might be interested on this one is that I ended up with a 4-year degree and a 5-year degree from University of Santa Clara, which is a Catholic university, and I am farthest from a Catholic that one could be. So if one wants to make a judgment on somebody with where they came from, what school they came from when they were earlier, it certainly does.
Pardon me.
Yeah.
How did you manage to get into a Catholic university then? And since you're not Catholic,
I went to a local electronics employer, and went to the employment office and said, I'm looking at Stanford University and I'm looking at University of Santa Clara or somewhere else. Where would you recommend? And they recommended the University of Santa Clara.
And you enjoyed going there?
Yeah.
Very good. All right. Are you working anymore at all, or you're retired?
I'm trying to retire.
Trying to
retire.
How long are you going to try?
Well, I'm down to, how do I put it? I'm charging for I'm supposed to be working only 1 week a month, working things off, but I spend more time up on the computer than I care to admit to. I still like it.
And you're enjoying it?
It's my haven from politics.
Yeah. So you have a partner, a companion? Do you have a partner or a companion?
Wife Joanne. Been married 11 years.
11 years. Any children?
I have three children from previous marriage. Jennifer, Kathleen, and Michael. The 2 older daughters, they're married. I've got 6 grandchildren. And the younger son, he's still in school.
Do they like you?
I hope so.
I always got a trick question, but I want to do one. You can nail me if you want to later Do you have a religious preference yourself, or are you a-religious or what?
I'm agnostic.
Okay. A political persuasion. Go ahead.
Yeah, political persuasion. I have difficulties. It's.
Are you left, right, or centrist pretty much across the board?
I'm left and moving lefter.
Left and moving lefter.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, Rick. It's interesting. I never heard it put that way before. How do you see the mainstream media? Or is it left or right, or biased, or neutral, or what?
Well, it's very interesting in that I look at the mainstream media and I piss and moan because it's too biased.
Family show. That's okay.
It's too conservative. On the other hand, we sit with my wife, and she will look at the mainstream media, and all her complaints are it's biased too much to the left.
Interesting. Yeah.
So by that criteria, maybe it's in the right place.
Okay.
Maybe.
Yeah. Do you read or listen to alternative media? Radio, TV?
I listen to KPOJ.
KPOJ, Progressive Radio.
Progressive Radio.
Tom Hartman.
Whatever happens to be on when I'm driving the car.
You like Big Eddie?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Tom Hartman, he's terrific. Few people who can get Tom Hartman on Progressive Radio or anywhere in the country. He's one of my few heroes anymore who's really solid left and progressive.
And that's that was where I ran across the Beaverton Peace Vigil when Ben was calling in the mornings to talk about it and invite folks to come down. And
yeah, he's been on the show a number of times. Ben Fain?
I don't know his last name. I just know him as Ben.
Okay. Do you have any memberships in any political or social organizations that are worth mentioning? I'm an ACLU member and Common Cause and a bunch of other stuff. And I'm checking your liberal credentials.
MoveOn.org, Humanists of Greater Portland.
Yeah, you're a fellow humanist. Yeah. So what's important?
What's important?
Yeah.
What? Moving away from a society that is addicted to war and dominance, and one that is comfortable and admires peace. And I can complain all I want about the politicians, but at a certain level, I've come to the conclusion that politicians, they're not leaders, they are followers. They do have to do what it takes to their constituents to get reelected.
Okay. Sure, boy. Are you ticklish?
Not that I'll admit to.
Where?
This is a family show.
Shall we move over here, the other side here, to my old friend who's been on before, and Kevin. So, shall I ask you questions, or you
ask away, Don? Ask away.
So I'm sure some of the viewers are seeing you now, are seeing you for the first time. And when and where were you born?
I was born in Hollywood, California.
Hollywood. You got that look about him. Look at those like handsome devil, isn't he? Hollywood.
And 1958.
Really?
Yeah.
And why are you up here?
I'm also in the electronics industry, and I came up here to work for Tektronix in 1980, and stayed because it's in Oregon, one of the most beautiful places.
Yeah. Don't believe him. We got enough people here in Oregon already. Don't anymore. You Californians come up, because we're all three ex-Californians. I was originally from New Orleans, but anyhow, religious in any way? Are you spiritual? Or?
Well, I can tell you all sorts of stories. I actually, being from the Los Angeles area, I had the opportunity to go to several different parochial schools, and so I went to a Jewish nursery school, Episcopal grade school and junior high, a Catholic high school, and then went to Indiana to go to engineering school at Purdue. So I've had a variety, and actually I was the chairman of the church here in Beaverton for 2.5 years.
And what religion was that?
It's the Unity Church.
Oh yeah, yeah, I like what they're about.
Yeah, it's you know, very simple, that everyone has the right to have their own beliefs, and it's not about changing someone's beliefs. We're all here together. We've got more in common than we have in difference.
So when people say, I'm Catholic, or I'm Protestant, or I'm Methodist, or whatever, if you belong to the Unity Church, how do you call yourself? I'm a Unity or what?
You may still call yourself a Catholic or a Protestant. There's no particular conversion that takes place. I think you might say you call yourself Don.
Okay.
You call yourself Kevin.
Okay. Are you still active in the church to any degree?
I am, actually. And it's very interesting working with people, trying to co-create a comfortable and accepting place.
Okay. There's a gentleness about you. Yeah.
Well, I think I agree with Roger that we've been experiencing profoundly for the last 5 or 6 years, where the solution to our problems seems to be violence. And I'm not of that school. I don't believe that violence is an answer to a majority of the problems. And you know, we can see when a kid goes into high school and he's upset with his teacher and he carries a bunch of guns, we can see that that's not a way to act. Why is it any different for us to go into a country that we don't agree with a bunch of guns?
Okay. So you have a partner at this time?
No, I don't.
Okay. Okay, everybody out there, if you're interested in Kevin, why, his email address, no. I might cause some problems here. Okay, of course, you're very conservative, aren't you, right wing?
Well, it's interesting because I consider myself an independent, and I think I would consider myself a centrist, though other people might not. And I smile because we hear the word liberal, and I know that liberal and liberty come from the same root. They both share the same Latin root. The word is liber, to be free. And so liberty is something that we all agree in as being important. It's, you know, a root of our country, the concept of being free, and someone who is liberal would allow different people to be free in their beliefs.
Then how come liberal is like a pejorative when the conservatives say you're a liberal, and people get the impression that this is a bad thing?
I don't take it that way. A friend of mine had a great story. He said, imagine you are at Thanksgiving dinner, and you have an opportunity for a conservative portion or a liberal portion. Which would you choose? The choice is yours. And so someone may come at me and believe that liberal is somehow a negative position, but it's not. It's about liberty. It's about being free.
Yeah. All right. This is your last question, so make it a good answer.
All right.
Are you your brother's or sister's keeper?
If we were going to quote the Bible, I think that they would say to take the beam out of your own eye before you look to take the splinter out of someone else's. So yeah, we're responsible for ourselves first and for each other collectively. When I say responsible, I'm particularly thinking about when we're pointing our finger at somebody, and I should keep my brother in line. So there's 3 other fingers pointing at me. I should keep myself in line.
Yeah. All right, so it's almost break time. So let's take a break. When we come back, let's talk a little bit about the Beaverton Peace Vigil, and then go from there with what we want to talk about, okay? So let me get to my script. We're going to put up on the screen some important information that you may want to write down during the break. So get a pencil, a pen, and some paper. I want to tell you about broadcast information. For you viewers who live in the Washington County part of the Portland, Oregon metro area, Conversations with Dr. Don shows are broadcast 5 times each week. Typically, a new show is first aired on a Tuesday and is rebroadcast on the following Friday through Monday. And I also do a live call-in show periodically. A show is recorded live so that you viewers in the Portland, Oregon metro area can call in and give us your say on whatever it is that we're talking about during that show. The next live call-in show will be on Thursday, and that'll be up on the screen later on. And then you can also tell your computer-using friends to watch Dr. Don shows on the internet anytime by going to video.google.com and entering Conversations with Dr. Don. And I will put up on the screen some key Washington, D.C. phone numbers. So if something that we've talked about and you want to learn how to talk to your representative in Washington, D.C. or the president, then you can use these phone numbers, because we need to let them know what we think about what they're doing or not doing. They need to hear from us. And believe me, they do want to hear from us. So let's put up on the screen during the break the broadcast schedule, the live call-in show information for the Portland, Oregon metro area, and internet address to view the Dr. Don shows, and the U.S. Capitol key phone numbers. And we'll be back. Okay, we're back. I'm counting down with my camera person behind camera 2, and thank you. I'm glad you stayed with us. And now we're going to get into the hot part of the show, where we'll talk about the Portland Peace Vigil and other things that are of interest to you peace-loving people out there and who you're concerned about where our country's about. And okay, let's let it unfold here. So tell us a little about the Portland Peace Vigil. Please, somebody start.
Well, we call it the Washington County Peace Vigil.
Washington County Peace Vigil.
We're in Washington County, and we're specifically in Beaverton, across from the Beaverton Library.
In Oregon.
In Oregon. And we've been out there for coming up on 3 years now, Wednesday nights. All sorts of different people, a lot of different points of view, but everyone's peaceful. We spend an hour, mostly, we spend an hour together, and a variety of signs, and people have a chance to talk about what's on their mind, and it's a great experience.
What's the purpose of it?
Well,
the Washington County Peace Vigil.
When we first did this, Cindy Sheehan was standing outside of George Bush's ranch asking questions. And
Cindy Sheehan.
Of course, she didn't get any answers. And we did a vigil in support of her. And over 350 people came.
Wow.
And what was amazing...
On Fifth and Hall?
Fifth and Hall. What was amazing was so many people said, I had no idea that there were other people who felt the way that I feel. And it's really what it has evolved into. Instead of being at home complaining or fighting or what have you, a chance to come together once a week, rain or shine or snow or wind and all the above, and talk with like-minded people. And we get a lot of support from people driving by. It's really a wonderful opportunity to come together.
Do you think, you said, pardon, something to the effect that you feel good doing that. Do you think it has any impact or any effect on the administration in Washington and what they're about in our policies or regarding other countries and society in general? Your peace vigil.
Well, I have an interesting, maybe different opinion on that, that in Washington, the administration, it's a handful of people, 6 to 7 people.
Yeah, I don't think Washington isn't going to be conscious of what we're doing in the Beaver and the Peace Vigil. I mean, we can go to a march in downtown Portland with 10,000 people, and I don't think Washington pays any attention to that either.
Yeah, and I guess my feeling is that maybe we should stop paying attention to Washington. There's 300 million of us in the United States, and we have the power.
Well, I guess I look for 3 things in doing it. One of them is it just feels like I'm doing something more than sitting at home and complaining on the TV and browsing around the internet. It also gets me out with a group like-minded where I can chat and express my views and get some support, and we bounce ideas off us. And the other one is it lets those drivers that are going by know that there are people out there that are concerned enough to get out, and it's okay to be critical and question the administration.
Yeah.
You know, one of our activities while we're standing there is kind of keeping account. How many people are waving? How many people are honking? How many people are giving the peace sign? It gets more.
Do you have a guesstimate of a ratio of people who give the positive signs and those who give negative signs? Or what percentage would you guess at? Because I've been there off and on, and I'm feeling guilty now for not being there more often because I can and I will.
But no reason to feel guilty. It's been an increasing number of support, where I would say it's 95 to 99% of the people that drive by show support by honking, waving, peace signs, smiling, yelling. And every once in a while, we'll have someone who has a different opinion, and
expresses it.
Expresses it. We call it the one-finger peace sign. And it's a very, very small minority. What's been particularly interesting is if you wanted to stereotype who is going to do this, that, or the other thing. We had an individual that came last night, an older gentleman driving a Buick, and he rolled his window down and pulled up, and we thought, well, this might be a challenge. And in fact, what he gave us was a copy of Kucinich's impeachment.
Oh, that's what he gave you.
Articles, and he said, I'm giving this to everybody I know, pass it around.
Really?
So more and more, and of course we have veterans that stop by from World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the first Gulf War, and even the current conflicts, both from Afghanistan and Iraq. And there's a lot of people that feel we can do more than shoot each other.
Yeah, it feels good whenever I'm there. So say a few more words about this, will you? This articles of impeachment by Dennis Kucinich.
Well, we were just talking about the media earlier, and you may not see this on the 6 o'clock news, that Dennis Kucinich put 35 articles of impeachment into the House of Representatives, which the House immediately sent to committee, which is essentially putting it into the abyss. However, the articles are available online. They're quite enlightening and supported by an incredible amount of documentation that is available to anyone with a desire to read or a little bit of internet access.
Yeah. I looked at the fact that the amendment was immediately sent off to Judiciary Committee, and that's where it's just going to sit. And I feel like what we need to be doing now is some pressure on that committee in Washington that if something of this magnitude is passed on to a Judiciary Committee, don't they have a responsibility to actually look at and come up with a finding on it rather than just put it in the closet and ignore it?
And yes, they do, but my thinking is they have other responsibilities that they have not responded to or acted on because of some other priorities that have been forced on them by the moneyed interest, if I will, or the people who really run things in Washington, like Rove and the other gang of neocons who are really pulling Bush's strings. He's only a puppet. And people are saying, well, it's not going to go anywhere. Well, why do that? Why articles of impeachment by Kucinich? Well, I'm thinking, well, on the record, I get kind of wild with my thinking sometimes. The record will show now that these are in the congressional record, these articles of impeachment. And heaven forbid something awful happens in the next 3, 4, or 5 years, as they do something more than 9/11, and I hope not. And we're seriously threatened, all because of, for the most part, because of the behavior of the neocons in the Bush administration. We can say there was one American who had the courage and the guts to say, hey, I was alone, but I stood up. And it always starts this way, as far out as this seems, this idea of impeaching the president, considering the present administration and the judiciary. I think back in history where there was one lone dissenter, and it finally took hold in the Vietnam era. There were very few of us who were taking to the streets in LA, marching down Wilshire Boulevard. So I've been a Kucinich supporter for a long, long time, and I'm glad he did it. But what are you going to do about Pelosi? She says impeachment is not on the table.
And interestingly, it was the Democrats that voted to send it to committee. Pelosi, I'm not sure who she's working for. She doesn't seem to be working for the people.
Well, one of the things that I look at on it is that we feel like so much of the constitutional rights are being taken away by the Republican wing of this administration, but our right for impeachment is being taken away by a Democrat. And you know, while I always want to see a politician do what they say, that is what a politician should do, and now I'm looking at Nancy Pelosi, who said she would take it off the table, and she took it off the table, and she's doing what she said she would do, and as frustrating as can be.
That's why I have a hard time from now and then when we're talking about Democrats and Republicans, because when it really gets right down to it, it doesn't matter what political party a person belongs to. There's a higher order of priority to be taken care of, and there's indeed a class warfare going on.
Yeah, well, and I agree with you. I don't think we're no longer at a point where it's constructive to point Democrat or Republican or even liberal or conservative. It's we the people. It's we the people of the United States. We're looking at $4 a gallon gas, and we're looking at close to, well, coming up on $1 trillion that we've spent on an ill-advised war on terror. You know, a war against a war where the enemy is as much in the imagination as it is in reality. We're looking at increasing security by chasing ghosts, where we've lost the idea of economic security at home. We have millions of people, their homes in foreclosure. Where's the security? We've lost our way, and I don't think it's constructive anymore to be pointing at these people and those people and who's at fault. What are we going to do to move forward? How are we going to get past shooting each other or past being enemies with everyone we can imagine to doing something constructive and doing something creative towards real issues like economic security or environmental security, things that are truly facing us, that it's going to take the adults in the population to come forward and do something about this.
So what do the adults have to do? The adults in this population to do something about this that we're talking about. What do we need to do besides the Washington County Peace Vigil? Do you have any ideas? What do we need to do?
Well, I think the first step when you realize you've are facing a challenge is to admit that you're facing a challenge, and to have an honest dialogue about what the challenge truly is. It's so easy to follow a leader who's dressed himself up in a uniform as a war president and forget that this president avoided the Vietnam War, the one that he had the opportunity to serve in, as did everyone in his administration. They had other priorities. They are very happy to send other people to do their business, but they're not leaders. Leadership is going to come from the people sitting down, talking with each other, and truly discussing what is important to us.
From the grassroots up, huh?
It's interesting that when you talk about nobody in this administration was in the Vietnam War, we are looking at a potential president. We have a presidential candidate who was in fact in the Vietnam War, and yet it doesn't appear like his approach to international affairs and what the country should be doing, it doesn't seem that it's any different. I don't understand. He spent all that time as a prisoner of war. It seems like he should appreciate how bad it is to be in that situation and not to try and put other people in that situation.
So wealth and greed, there's other priorities that are more important than the ones that the media would have us address and consider. So for me, I think that we, as individual citizens, we need to start at the grassroots level and anywhere along the way and organize and resist as best we can. And I think, bottom line, it's going to take taking to the streets again, as it always has. When the regime has become so overpowering and so dictatorial, the only way to shut it down is to shut down the system. If they can't make money and they can't have things go on, then they will lighten up a little bit. And I don't want to talk about revolution or revolt or overthrowing, but something needs to happen. And I think, as in France, the latest thing that's happened like that, where you just be non-violently passive and don't do anything, don't go to work, and shut the system down. Something's got to change radically because the direction we're heading. Do you think this election coming up in November is going to make a difference?
I do not know. Yes, I think it can potentially make a difference, but the image that I have in my mind is it's like we're on the Titanic, and it's heading full steam, and we're right now, the captain is pulling as hard as he can right towards the icebergs. He can't see them, so he doesn't believe that they're there. Somebody else can take over and start pulling the wheel in a slightly different direction, but it will be very slow.
So you think we can avoid this disaster?
I didn't say that.
Okay.
Well, you might argue that we are in the disaster right now.
Yeah, I mean,
there are 150,000 soldiers in Iraq being shot at this very moment as we're sitting in the studio. And the Intelligence Committee recently had their findings, the Phase 2 findings, that the majority of the committee, including Democrats and Republicans, said that George Bush essentially lied us into the war. The information that he presented to us, that his administration presented to us, was incorrect. It was embellished, it was misled, and we've heard this from the Senate, we've heard this recently from Scott McClellan, but we also heard it all the way back to Richard Clark. We've had a parade of people leaving the administration saying that they basically make up anything they want and put it to the press, and the press regurgitates it without any critical analysis. We can complain about the press, or we can turn it off and do our own research. The information is available with a minimal amount of effort on the internet or talking to like-minded people. It's a great opportunity to have a dialogue with your neighbor about where are we going and who do we want to be today and tomorrow.
What's going to happen in Iraq?
I recently read a quote from Gandhi when he was trying to get the British out of India. And amazingly, the British complained that if they were to leave India, it would be chaos. And Gandhi said, well, it will be our chaos. The Iraqis want control of their destiny. We can't be their babysitter forever. They have the ability and the desire to be self-ruling. And as long as we are occupying their country, they can't be there.
I think it's worse than just whether we're their babysitter or not. I mean, I think that our presence there is worse than that, in that if there are two factions, and there's at least two factions in Iraq, if one of them is making headway because they have backing of the United States, then the other faction is going to fight just as hard as they can against the United States and the occupation. And if it turns the other way, then the fighting's going to be the other way. There are two parties there, and they are fighting over the United States. If we get out, it feels like they will sort it out eventually, because then they are just fighting themselves. And yes,
that's the name of the game, really. I think the U.S., what's going on in Iraq is not really a failure, because the aim of the administration was to have them self-destruct.
You could reasonably argue that was the aim of the administration. And clearly there's a misdirection and a exploitation of the emotions of the American people. Do we want to believe that we lost the war in Iraq? Well, of course we didn't lose the war. We destroyed the army and the country in a few short weeks. We captured Saddam. He's been executed. The war has been won.
Lynched.
We are occupying a country where we have no business being there. Any terrorist that is in Iraq is a direct result of our presence in that country.
So the war against Iraq was a ruse so that the ruling elite of the imperialists can take over that country and that part of the world. I was jokingly saying to a friend of mine that the U.S. has 48 states, contiguous states, and then they have another state, Hawaii, which is off another island someplace else. And then there's Alaska, which is way in the northern part of North America. And then I've been arguing for some time that Israel is really the 51st state. And then I'm suggesting, well, maybe we're looking forward to Iraq being the 52nd state.
Last Thursday, I managed to catch Barack Obama's speech to AIPAC, and the statements that he made, the direction he went, the promises he made to Israel, just was kind of an eye-opener to me in terms of being able to settle the Israeli-Palestine issue. I feel like he's already kind of given the game away. I don't see, given the promises that he made to Israel, I don't see how he can come up with a solution to that problem.
Agree.
And what a state of affair we've come to, where a presidential candidate has to go before the Israel Political Action Committee, make promises in order to get their approval, to get a chance at the presidency.
The power of that lobby, the AIPAC, American Israel, it isn't a political action, it's a lobbying group.
Yeah, Political Action Committee, isn't that the...
And that's something,
no, that's wrong?
It's something else. But I was so turned off and disgusted and sad because when I saw him, to me, groveling, and every presidential candidate, and I'm not an anti-Semite, and everyone is doing their genuflecting and they're bowing down and scraping to be sure they get that vote. Nothing is going to settle in the Middle East or any place else in the world unless something is done about the Arab-Israeli situation. And I'm saying, well, Obama is saying things so that he sounds more centrist or more conservative so that he can get those votes and win. But how much can you compromise? And my friends are saying when he's finally the president, then he doesn't have to make those kinds of statements and he can be more humane or humanistic or liberal and be fair to people around the world. But I'm not sure. There's other things about him that scare me. So, but then again, you don't get to elect a guy like Kucinich who's straight up, who tells it like it is. You don't get a Nader.
He was my
first choice. So what do we do?
Well, I think what we do is we as citizens have to continue to voice our opinion, even though it may sound like a voice in the wilderness. The the magnitude of a large number of voices. What is in the best interest of the United States? And certainly the interests of Israel can dovetail with the interests of the United States. But it's the United States that we are citizens of, and we really need to look at where we are going.
So what you're saying is kind of confusing for me, because our interest, there's the interest of the ruling elite in this country, the administration, and the interest of ordinary citizens. The ordinary, average American citizen is liberal, is humanistic and kind and loving, and really that's what we're about. But when you have an administration that's behaving the way that it is, so for me, what may be worth looking at is countries in other regions of the world are resisting successfully American domination, like in Latin America, for example, and Hugo Chavez and a lot of other countries in that area are resisting successfully domination by the U.S. And in the European countries and other countries too, the populations are unhappy with what the U.S., the administration, is doing in the Middle East and in Afghanistan. So hopefully that's going to be some hope, some chance for us if countries in other parts of the world successfully resist U.S. domination. And it's going to take some sort of cataclysm to, the dollar is going to collapse, a major depression that's going to affect the world. I'm waiting for something to happen, and it's just scary.
Well, I'm optimistic. In terms of resisting American dominance, can we resist it? I heard you mention the ruling elite, but the elite only rules because we believe in their power. George Bush is no different than you. He's just as strong and just as normal and just as human. He's just one person. The ruling elite, certainly they have power of resources and power of assets, but they don't have power of people. And
they have the power of the vote.
Well, we can get back to the opening segment, which was the pictures of Hillary, and how you can frame any piece of news the way you want. The media is so important in this whole issue.
That's the key, I think. Now I'm getting a high sign that we should wind down pretty quick here. So you have a closing comment or thought that would be useful for the viewers out there based on what we talked about, and it's been sounding sort of negative and for me depressing, but what can we say to the viewers out there that would be useful for them to see us through this and have things work out better for us? Well, we'll go first.
Well, I guess I think right now it's use the internet, use it intelligently. Don't just read through things, but question everything that you read and look at where the sources are. But really try and form your own opinions. There's an awful lot of information out there. It's very hard to find kind of all aspects and a balanced view, but you're not going to get it from the mainstream media.
Alternative media are sources of information. How about you, Kevin?
And I would.
What would you say?
I would echo that, and but I would also encourage you to talk to your neighbor, talk to your friends, and talk to the people that maybe you think you disagree with. To look for the common ground, the thing that really is the American value, the American value of charity and creativity, and we can work our way out of problems. We will do this together. I am optimistic. And the power that be can remain in power by keeping us divided.
All right. Got to stop you. So keep your pens and pencils handy, because you may want to jot down something that we'll show you in the closing credits. You really got to stop now in about another minute or so. I would invite you to give us feedback, both positive and negative, about any aspect of the show, and I mean it. It helps us to give you a better show. And my email address, friendlydon@aol.com. And you saw my guest email addresses up on the screen when they were They were shown on the screen. Okay. Public service announcements. I have time for maybe one or two. I want to tell you first of all about the ACLU. That's so critically important. The American Civil Liberties Union. Put that slide up. Our civil liberties need to be protected so much because they're really threatened by the present administration. There's the national office website and the phone number. Join the ACLU. They're really important. The ACLU has a hotline in case you think you've been stopped by law enforcement, who sometimes get a little over eager. I'm not anti-law enforcement. And then call that number because they need to know that someone is stopping a citizen for something other than a suspected criminal activity. So, before I say goodnight, I want to say thank you to my crew and to everybody else who's been a part of this show, and my wonderful director, Dennis. And remember, KFC. Yeah, KFC, not Kentucky Fried Chicken. That's my favorite thing to say when I close the show. KFC meaning kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind, be friendly, and be charitable. To you too. And you, and you, and everybody in the control room, and Rick, and number one, and you. Thank you, and good night.